Hey everyone, welcome to Hit the Apex podcast. It's Jawad here as always, and F1 is back after the mid-season break, Belgian Grand Prix over the weekend, and we're looking ahead to the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort as well, coming up in a couple of days' time. And yeah, who would have thought that we would have had the result we did, considering all the grid penalties, but it's hard not to believe that it was possible for Max Verstappen, a masterclass coming through the field from P14 to win his ninth race of the season. And then Red Bull as well, having a crushing 1-2 finish with Ferrari well behind them. So it was one of those weekends that kind of reaffirmed this prophecy or theory I have about this shaping out to be like season 2011 in terms of Red Bull and their golden boy winning the championship in the way he did. And quite interestingly as well, after the race, a few of us were discussing, possibilities of, what's the largest gap in points between first and second in the championship. And I did some research because I was quite intrigued whether that would be a possibility this year. And with the modern point system being how it is, 25 points for a win, and then you have your +1 for a fastest lap, and then another sprint race to come as well. The biggest margin was back in 2013 between Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso. It was 155 points between those two at the end of the season. So given the fact that we've got more races than we did in 2013, we've got more points on offer with the sprint and fastest laps as well, there is a chance that Verstappen could eclipse that. That would be quite sensational. And really, it puts into perspective the achievements that Vettel had when he was at Red Bull, if Max can emulate that. So much for a driver who said he'd just be happy winning one championship in his career, and now he's pretty much got one hand on the trophy, his second championship trophy in 2022. So going into the race at Spa, basically a spate of power unit penalties took the headlines over the weekend. You had the likes of Max, you had Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, Mick Schumacher, Guan Yu Zhou, Yuki Tsunoda, and also Valtteri Bottas as well. So that's, more than a quarter of the grid, almost half the grid actually, getting sent to the back of the grid for penalties. There was a bit of confusion, I think, amongst people with how that the grid would look with those penalties. In my mind, it's nearly not as bad as what it was going back to like 2015, 2016, when you had McLaren Honda taking massive grid penalties in every race. They'd be taking 60 positions per race almost, because they'd have to bring a new power unit almost every time they hit the track. But the way that it was explained by Formula One and all the experts and everything made it quite easy to understand, even for someone who probably is new to the sport. So Bottas got a, like 25 place grid penalty or something for the components he changed, but the components that everyone else changed warranted an automatic back of the grid penalty. And with the back of the grid penalty, the way it's determined is how you qualify. So essentially, you've got a second grid order with, the penalty runners there. So it was, I don't know, it just seemed easy to figure out. I don't know why Sky in their commentary, it's always Sky who always have this sort of commentary, is like, I know it's confusing for everyone. It's like, no, if you explain it properly, I'm sure anyone will understand. Don't have to. It's like doom scrolling, but on broadcast. Yeah, whatever. getting kind of tired of Sky Sports commentary again. It'd be nice to hear some fresh voices like they do have this year, which is really good to see in some parts. But then there's the other parts, the more established, who just, I don't know, they always like to find something bad about what is going on in F1. So in qualifying, we had pole position on the track for Verstappen, but Carlos Sainz was able to inherit that ahead of the race, ahead of Sergio Perez in second. Then you had Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton on the second row of the grid. It was an odd start for Checo. He kind of pointed his car in the direction of covering off La Source on the inside, but he pretty much got swallowed by both the Mercedes behind and also Alonso. Sainz got the lead away, which, he looked pretty comfortable there. Bit of drama behind. Alonso got the slipstream down the Kemmel Straight on Hamilton, despite having started ahead of Hamilton, but Hamilton got ahead, and then he got himself ahead, did Alonso, going down the inside, and then Hamilton kind of turns in on him at Lecombe. There was contact. Hamilton was up in the air on two wheels, and was quick to admit that it was his fault, that, he could have easily backed out of that, but, tried to go for the corner. Alonso had the inside. He was very vociferous as well, with some team radio straight afterwards, comment something along the lines of, he's doesn't really start races from outside pole position, so he doesn't know how to race, something like that. Anyway, Alonso just doing Alonso. Hamilton, though, all class, and was able to apologise straight after, and, it shows you the difference between these two right now, which, read into it what you want, but I think it was pretty much done. Alonso did at least get to continue on in the race, whereas Hamilton was out on the first lap. Very rarely do you see Hamilton out on a first lap. I think the last time might have been 2016 in Barcelona with Nico Rosberg. And he hasn't had very many DNFs either in general. So not good that run came to an end for him. On the second lap, we had Nicholas Latifi run across the gravel there at Lecombe as well, have a spin, and then Valtteri Bottas in avoidance of that kind of spins on his own and then gets bogged in the gravel, so he was out of the race, unfortunately. And that brought out the safety car, allowed the likes of Verstappen and Leclerc as well to gain some positions or get the field compressed so that they could gain some positions as well, because Max was a rocket ship. Before the safety car came out, he had already got himself close to the top 10, and then after the safety car continued to side his way through the field. Unfortunately for Leclerc, there was a puncture that he had just before the safety car came in, or I think just after the safety car. So that pretty much did his afternoon in, and it was found later that the puncture was caused by, he had a piece of Verstappen's visor tear off stuck in his brake duct or something, which had caused a problem. So that was a bit devastating for Leclerc. Bit of a quiet weekend in that sense, but at the same time just kind of reaffirms how he's not really in this hunt anymore. There's not really much to hope for in the championship with the way the rest of his race panned out. You had the only Ferrari up at the front in the form of Sainz. They reacted on lap 12 to try and get an undercut with him from the lead, but Red Bull weren't going to have any of that. They were able to continue on. Verstappen came in on lap 16, switched over to the medium tyre, and then was able to take the lead of the race back on lap 19. So this is someone who started in 14th, took the lead before the pit stops, or just after the pit stops when Sainz came in, and then on fresh medium tyres was able to overhaul Sainz again and take the lead, and was able to just cruise on home after that. He made one more pit stop on lap 31. Checo did the same. He did a medium hard strategy to secure second, and then you had Sainz, who was on the hard tyre, same strategy as Checo at the end, with no pace, and became under threat from George Russell behind, and Russell as well closing the gap to within 2 seconds at the end of the race, but made a mistake at Stavelot, I think, to settle for P4. So yeah, again, hard tyre and Ferrari not really the best of friends, but finishing third I think would have been better than not finishing on the podium again, because that's kind of how their last few races ended up, was for Ferrari. But Leclerc, just what's going on there with Leclerc? The strategy again, the strategists. In fact, you've got to question, and that was the word, question. They kept asking a lot of questions of their driver. It was as if they had no confidence. They had no idea what they were doing. Like, yes, I did say a couple of weeks ago that it would be nice if the drivers at Ferrari at the moment, Leclerc and Sainz, had the confidence in themselves to dictate the strategy like the great drivers like Verstappen and Hamilton do. You know, they say, why are we going on that tyre? I want this tyre. And then kind of pressures the team into changing the decision or like ahead of the pit stop. But it just seems so fractured, seems so broken, where the engineer has to ask you a million questions about what tyre you want to be on, and the driver himself has no clue either what's going on. And then what happens is they make a confusing third pit stop. So they had fifth, or they might have had, no, they had fifth all sewn up. And it wasn't like they were going to get any extra out of it, but they brought him in for a soft tyre again, like they did in Hungary, when they knew that they weren't going to be on the podium and whatnot. So bring him in for the soft tyre, go for the fastest lap, but didn't get the fastest lap, did he? And then what happens is they take a 5-second penalty as well for speeding in the pit lane, and he was found to be 1 kilometre an hour over the speed limit in the pit lane, which put him behind Alonso in the end. So he finished 6th instead of 5th, so they lost another position. And, you know, given the fact that their chief rival was able to win the race quite comfortably, it's like, what are you guys doing? Why? And even Alonso said after the race, only such a strange thing could Ferrari do. So it continues the joke, you know, the practical joke that is Ferrari this season. And it's kind of like, I don't feel sorry for them in that respect, but I feel sorry for the fans who have to deal with this, because they have the fastest car, you know, over a single lap, easily. They keep making bad decisions when it comes to strategy. Like, they could easily just not use the hard tyre at all, you know, devise a strategy around using only the soft and mediums. That's what they seem to have the pace on. And then just try and force Red Bull into making mistakes, or to make them make a decision rather than having to react to what their rivals are doing around them. They're just not really being the innovators in this instance. You know, this is why Mercedes and Red Bull now sound like a broken record, but this is why Mercedes and Red Bull are as good as they are. It's not just because they have the fastest car, not at all. It's because they have all these other things that bring the team together and can execute a race much better than Ferrari can. So it is pretty much a given that, you know, this year is not, there's no chance for them yet. And I think they kind of escaped the fact that Mercedes would have closed in on them in terms of points if Hamilton didn't have that DNF, but they were able to extend the margin over Mercedes a little bit here. But, you know, that's still, I feel like, going to shrink as the season goes on, and Mercedes are going to jump ahead. But it's embarrassing. It is definitely embarrassing, you know, and it's hard to go beyond Max for winning his home race, despite the fact that, you know, people are saying that Zandvoort, the circuit, not the fact that it doesn't have as many straights as, apart from the main straight or whatever, the corners, that will suit Ferrari more. I don't think so. I think you could even start Max from the pit lane and he could win the race. Someone was saying on Twitter, I think, that he could, for some entertainment, start him in Belgium and he could come and win the race as well. So that is just shows you the state of Ferrari and what's going on there at the moment. So it's pretty dismal. But again, you can't take away how good Max is, his performance this race and all season so far. He is just continuously showing how good he is, and just, yeah, you can't really come up with more superlatives. I might have to learn another language to start praising this kid if he continues this run, which he most likely is. Anyway, behind them now, so Alonso finishing the race in 5th, of course, after that first lap incident with Hamilton, escaping any kind of sanction as well, so it was good for him and Alpine to get points in 5th. Esteban Ocon coming in 7th, having started from, you know, back of the grid with the penalty. He as well had the highlight play of the race, which was the pass on the Kemmel Straight on Sebastian Vettel and Pierre Gasly. Very much like Mika Hakkinen in 2000 with the Schumacher and Ricardo Zonta. I think there was a moment where pre-race you could see Mika Hakkinen himself talking to Ocon on the grid, so perhaps giving him some tips to how to execute that sort of pass. But great job from Ocon. And Alpine, again, the team that nobody wants to drive for, and they are just performing solidly in the midfield. And, while it's fair and well to praise them for how well they're doing in the midfield, it's still, the question is begging to be asked, when are they going to take that step towards the front three teams, which is something that they've not been able to do since Renault returned as a factory team in 2016. They've been quite far from being able to break into that top three since then. So are we going to see that happen next year or the year after? Probably more so the year after. People keep saying 2024 when it comes to the likes of McLaren and for Alpine as well. Ocon very much committed to that, which is good. So will he get to bear the fruits of their progress and everything? He's already had a win for them last year, which came in bizarre circumstances, but a win is a win. In Dominic Toretto quoting terms, whatever. So, yeah, I feel like for Ocon and his loyalty, there should be some kind of reward at it. Otherwise, then you can go on and beat up on Alpine and say, well, they really haven't done a good job, have they? They keep announcing 5-year plans and, just nothing seems to come of it. So, yeah, very confusing times at Alpine, but what they are doing well is performing on track at the moment. So that's the good part. Behind him, Seb Vettel in 8, great drive from him as well, driving really well at the moment. I guess you could say that the shackles are off him, given that we know that he's retiring at the end of the season. And like I said in the mid-season special, I was like, it would be nice not to see Vettel, or it would be nice to see Vettel actually be competitive in these last few races before he retires, rather than letting his career end on a whimper outside the points. I want him to show us glimpses of the Vettel of old, the Vettel that everyone came to love when he was at Ferrari. Maybe not the ruthless Vettel that we got when he was at Red Bull, but, everyone seemed to start loving him when he was at Ferrari. Behind him, Pierre Gasly in 9th. He ended up having to start the race from the pit lane. He would have started in the top 10 anyway, and whether he would have gained places or finished just in the top 10 remains to be seen. But there was an electrical problem that they had, so they had to start him from the pit lane and made that long third stint work on the medium tyre, pretty much as Vettel and I think Alex Albon did too. Maybe not Vettel, but Albon certainly. And I think points for Gasly has been much needed. AlphaTauri already, we've talked about them and said that, they've been quite disappointing this year, and, they're going to have to just take whatever results they can in this instance. Alex Albon, at the head of a frustrating DRS train, really, that no one could get past. He just made his car as wide as possible, did Albon, and make that strategy that he was on work to get a point for Williams, and he just keeps doing that, which is really good to see. We know that his future is committed to Williams as well, so I think there's faith between both parties. And yeah, Williams, again, a disappointment that they could not take a step forward this year, but hopefully with someone like Albon committed to them, they can start making those steps. They've got the resources to be able to do so now, so it all just comes down to the execution and whatnot. So good job from him. But then, of course, behind him, you've got all those people who would have been disappointed to be stuck behind. So Lance Stroll was the first cab off the rank. You had Lando Norris as well. And then you had Yuki Tsunoda and Guan Yu Zhou, who kind of had a little battle to themselves at the end of the race, and Tsunoda coming up top trumps. So again, Yuki having to start from the pit lane too, which was decided just after qualifying or before the race, well before the race, that they would pull him out of Parc Ferme and then start him from the pit lane, and he would have been starting from the back of the grid anyway with the penalties. McLaren, it's so disappointing this season. I know there's a podium for Lando Norris, but it's kind of an outlier in this instance because they just don't have the car speed, and they kind of bungled the pit stops again. They really made a hash of it in terms of putting both cars out into traffic. Lando had made a good start. He was making progress from his grid penalty. Ricciardo was in the top 10 as well at that point. But then, both pit stops saw both their cars come out in traffic and stuck in the DRS train behind Albon. And then for Ricciardo, he lost all pace. He just lost everything, having been stuck behind there. He couldn't even join in that battle with Joe and with Tsunoda at the end, so he kind of just floundered around in 15th and was only able to finish ahead of both Haas cars and Nicholas Latifi, who was the last of the classified runners. So I don't know if he's going to be on the grid next year. It's looking very hard at the moment if he is. I feel like someone is going to miss out anyway in 2023, whether it's him or Mick Schumacher even, because there was news from the week that Schumacher and his deal with the Ferrari Academy comes to an end at the end of this year. So whether that's actually, they've said that that's actually as a result of the contract just lapsing and no one was really interested in moving forwards with it. So it's not like they're cutting the association early, but it is a bit of a risk, I guess, for Schumacher, given the fact that if it wasn't for the FDA, he wouldn't have been brought in as such, or wouldn't have had the backing through his junior career to get into F1. He's been good this season, but again, not really setting the world on fire. He's not really in that mould of a George Russell or a Lando Norris, Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc, all those drivers that really shone in F2 and then came in F1 and did the same thing straight away, whereas Schumacher, last year you could have written off because of the situation with the car and not having the teammate really as a benchmark, whereas this year having Kevin Magnussen is more of a benchmark, and then the car is doing a lot better too. So, don't know what's going to happen with Schumacher in his future. People talking about whether he should go to Haas to Alpine. And if Pierre Gasly ends up leaving AlphaTauri, maybe they could jump on him to put him into the Red Bull pool of drivers. But again, I don't think, it would be worth it in that instance, as much as I want to see Schumacher Jr. on the grid. But I feel like either him or Ricciardo are going to miss out on a seat for next year because Haas, for some reason, want to bring back Antonio Giovinazzi, who had probably one of the most underwhelming Formula E seasons. And then again, the season before, he really didn't do much for Alfa Romeo when he had some good opportunities to do so. Chiefly Monza, I think back to Monza, where he had that top 10 start and then crashed on the first lap or something. That was not really good for them. A lot of questions still to be answered in terms of the silly season. We don't quite have any information yet about the CRB, the Contract Recognitions Board, from the FIA, their little meeting on Monday to resolve the Oscar Piastri matter. So the fact that, the only thing we've got so far still is Otmar Safnauer is saying that he's very confident that the ruling will fall on Alpine's side. I don't think so. I think more so, from what people have been saying, it's just a matter of settlement now. What can Alpine get out of it as compensation? Because it's pretty much a given that he's not going to drive for them next year and he will be driving for McLaren. So I think maybe we just have to wait for now either team to announce their plans for next season, and then, whether McLaren are going to have to part with more cash as a result, or there's going to be some kind of compensation heading towards Alpine's way. It is still just very much a bitter feud, and it's really sad that it's come to this. As I said, it's not something that you want to start your career in Formula One being remembered for. There's going to be more pressure on him now to perform next year because of it, and going into a foreign environment. If he had started his career with Alpine and whatnot, that would have been great because he's known the team for as long as he has. He's done so much testing and so much mileage, so I think he's just putting more pressure on himself. But then that's when we say fingers crossed and he actually delivers, because from what we've seen on all accounts, Piastri is very much a driver in that Russell, Norris and Leclerc and Albon mould. So hopefully he does deliver, and for all the Australians who will be sad when Ricardo leaves or ends up without a drive for next year, at least we've got someone else to cheer on. So we'll look forward to that. So the other big news that we did get over the Spa weekend, or two bits of big news that we got over the Spa weekend, is the fact that Spa will be on the calendar for next year. So looks like the event organisers and Formula One have come to a new deal. We didn't get any specifics about the deal, whether it would be long-term or short-term. And also F1 saying that more details about the 2023 calendar will come shortly. So perhaps at the sometime this month, now that we're into September. It's September the 1st today. Where has the year gone? As everyone will be saying, I'm sure. It's so funny. Everyone you talk to will say exactly the same thing. But then you'll say that every year. I think, we say it every year. Where has the year gone? So yeah, that's good news for Spa. I think, the power of the people perhaps has, forced this to happen, given the fact that fans and pundits alike and people, team personnel and everybody involved with Formula One, pretty much all the stakeholders alike, it would be like murder if Spa dropped off the calendar, because it is one of those iconic races. And rather than me sitting here now making a point to you why Spa should stay on the calendar, it's good that we've got it rescued and on there for next year. Although this year's race did not seem the most entertaining, which was a bit disappointing, but it is still one of the best tracks that the calendar has to offer. And like I say, I do not like the whole destination city, let's have a street circuit everywhere type deal. So yeah, we need these circuits. Also confirmed was the arrival of Audi into Formula One. So that was really exciting to tune into that press conference over Zoom and to see that this is actually happening. They're going to come into F1 as a power unit supplier in 2026. Even though there was a bit of mixed messaging with the fact that they had a show car with a show livery on display there at Spa. I was like, okay, you just coming in as a PU supplier, or are you going to be a factory team or whatever? And we know, or it is likely going to happen, that they're going to buy into Sauber and buy a significant stake as well in the team. And it was announced over the weekend that Alfa Romeo will be ending its association with the Sauber team at the end of 2023. So, the takeover process of Sauber by Audi will start as of 2024. So even though that's not been confirmed, we can only assume that that's what is going to happen. So great news. Great to see that we've got a new power unit manufacturer committed to the new regulations. And basically, the new regulations were designed to attract these new power unit suppliers, given the fact that the MGU-H, which was part of the power units from 2014, were so obsolete. And the fact that, pretty much Formula One hashed their introduction of hybrid power units. They weren't looking at what was going on anywhere else, looking on what was going on in World Endurance Championship, where Audi and Porsche were duking it out because they were able to do so in a cost-effective manner and in a manner that was more relevant to their road car projects. So, the fact that it's taken almost a decade for them to realise where they went wrong and having to now rework that to allow, prospective power unit manufacturers to come in and to make it more relevant to the road car industry. I think it's a good thing that we've finally reached that. It was quite hilarious, though, that there were some shots fired from Audi on their German counterparts in Mercedes, saying things like, "We're going to be building the first. We're going to be the first German manufacturer to actually build our power unit in Germany," because of course Mercedes builds there in Brixworth in the UK, and then also another tweet saying, "Rumour has it, rings are the new stars." So stars, the silver arrows being, Mercedes logo, and the rings being Audi. So that'll be quite interesting. And I think, given the fact that we've seen battles between Audi and Porsche in endurance racing for years, I think it's going to be just as good in Formula One. And Audi's not the kind of team who are going to half bake it or get it wrong. I feel like there are people who are going to sit there and laugh about whether they will actually do it right or not. I think, don't underestimate the likes of Audi and Porsche. I think they can very much be up there pretty quickly, whether it's within the first 2-3 years or from the outset, when the rules completely change. So exciting to see that, of course. And then, of course, we haven't heard quite yet what Porsche's doing too, but it should be announced hopefully soon that they will be entering in 2026 with Red Bull. Rounding things out then is some supercars with the Sandown SuperSprint talking points. So Sandown a couple of weeks ago now, but decided to pair it up with this episode instead. And it was pretty much, just the usual services normal in supercars land. We had a little bit of excitement with Will Davison and his race 24 win on Saturday. He got pole and then went on to win by 8.5 seconds, 8.5 seconds over Shane van Gisbergen and Anton De Pasquale. Described as a dream run by Davison himself, and some good news, I guess, like for him and for Shell V-Power Racing is the fact that the team are committed to him and De Pasquale for next season as well. So that locks them up in the driver market, but also an ownership change as well with the fact that the Ralph family behind, I think, Melbourne Baseball Club have bought in a stake into DJR. So while Ryan Story and DJ himself, Dick Johnson, will continue in their capacity and have their stakes within the team, having someone like Brett Ralph come in with his investment is kind of along the lines of what Penske did with his ownership of the team back in his day. So, it just shores up their future and hopefully they can find some success as well. But then come Sunday, there was problems. There was an electrical problem for Davison ahead of the qualifying for race 25, but they were able to turn it around and get him on pole for race 26. But it didn't really stop Van Gisbergen because he was the one who had the dream run on the Sunday at a 7.5 second win over Chaz Mostert and Will Brown on the first part of the Sunday races in race 25, and then cruised to victory ahead of Will Davison and his teammate, or Van Gisbergen's teammate, Brock Feeney in race 26. So Davison tried to do an SVG in race 26 by going long with a strategy. It didn't work for him. It was a nice battle at the start of the race that we had between him and Van Gisbergen, just duking it out for a couple of laps before there was a moment where he got hit from behind by his teammate De Pasquale and kind of lost the momentum going on there. And then for Van Gisbergen, the accolades keep coming in. There was his 70th win on Sunday as well, and it's hard to believe. I'm like, wow, he already reached that many wins in his career. I mean, he has been around longer than Scott McLaughlin, of course, and was winning races before McLaughlin was. But yeah, to reach 70, he's joined pretty esteemed company up there, because only the likes of Mark Scaife, Jamie Whincup, Craig Lowndes are all beyond 70 wins in their supercars career. He's also got 16 wins for the season as well, which is putting him perilously close to the record that McLaughlin set in 2019, which didn't think would be beaten anytime soon, of 18 wins in a season, because you remember the record that Craig Lowndes had with, I think, Mark Scaife went back to 1996 of having 16 wins in a season. So, will Van Gisbergen beat that? I mean, when will Van Gisbergen beat that, I think? And it could be possible that next time out in Pukekohe, which we're going back to New Zealand for the first time since 2019 as well, could be quite momentous if he was able to do it there on home soil, and also the fact that it is the last time we'll see Pukekohe on the Supercars calendar too. So, yeah, that'll be quite interesting to see. And again, Van Gisbergen is a driver like Verstappen this year. You just can't... You're just running out of words and superlatives to say about him, because they're doing so well in terms of their results, and they're just in another universe at the moment with their performance. And for Van Gisbergen as well, he's got such an enormous margin. It's 500 points now between him and next place driver. I can't even remember who it is. It might be Will Davison. But, if he gets to 600 points, for example, bags another 100 points over his rivals, then that's 2 rounds worth of points that he's got. So that means he could, if he sustains that after the Bathurst 1000, then that's championship sealed as well with 2 rounds to go. So we've got Pukekohe coming up, Bathurst, the big one, and then Gold Coast with its sprint format, and then also the Adelaide 500. So 2 grueling street races to come after the Bathurst 1000. And a bit of talk about that too over Sandown, which was good to see. And you know how I like to harp on about the fact that I love the Enduro Cup. I want to see an Enduro Cup back. But there was drivers and commentators coming out and saying that they need to bring back a pre-Bathurst Enduro. So even if it isn't an Enduro Cup as a whole with the 3 races, at least put that 500k race back and put it back at Sandown, because, drivers who are not the established co-drivers, because we see those big teams go after the likes of your Garth Tanders, your Jamie Whincups, Craig Lowndes, Fabian Coulthard and all. Now Lee Holdsworth, of course, announcing his retirement as well from full-time driving. He'll be hot property as a co-driver next year because of that win that he had with Chaz Mostert last year at the Bathurst 1000, is that it doesn't give those young drivers who are coming in from Super 2 getting the co-drive gigs a chance to get proper preparation. So the fact that they've just had 1 30-minute practice session there at Sandown, that's all they'll get before they head to the mountain. It's not great. And I like the idea of having that pre-Bathurst Enduro or even an Enduro Cup, because it gives those young drivers a chance to be able to show them their skills, to put themselves on the market for a full-time drive. Like we saw years ago, like with Declan Fraser, for example, who will be in the wild card with Craig Lowndes. He didn't even get an opportunity to steer the car, so that's incredibly unfair in the words of Garth Tander. But also seeing performances over the years, the likes of Bryce Fullwood, when he had one of his co-drive gigs with Kelly Racing and Nissan Motorsport, he put on a show at Sandown, and that really put him in the frame to get that full-time drive that he did eventually. So it's the perfect, it's the perfect breeding ground, the perfect stage for people to show their skills. The fact that Super 2 is really just underwhelmed this year. You've got so many good names on the grid, but unable to go anywhere for next year. The fact that a whole hoo-ha was kicked up about Zach Best and his pole position that he got at the Bend as a wild card, the fact that, we weren't even allowed to celebrate that. It was more so, it was because of the tyres and, they've got to change the rules for that. Just shows you how much of a meritocracy this sport is. It's just, let's keep the top 3 teams winning and everything else doesn't really matter. It's becoming a bit of a farce as supercars, to be honest. So hopefully, someone out there is listening and they can actually make some changes to allow the sport to allow the sport to flourish and for young drivers to be able to come in and succeed rather than one driver in a blue moon coming in and being able to do well. So that is that. And that pretty much wraps it up for then this week. Of course, we're going to keep the ball rolling with the Dutch Grand Prix afterwards and then Monza as well the week after. So plenty of F1, plenty to look forward to as well. Just waiting for the Oscar Piastri news. If we hear that over the weekend, I'm sure I will talk about it quite a bit next week. But other than that, have a good weekend. Take care. Enjoy the Dutch Grand Prix. Remember to keep an eye out on social. So at Hit the Apex Media is the Twitter account, and of course there's a Linktree to follow through to Instagram and all my articles and live blogs as well. And also check out the Grid Talk podcast as well. I was on the race review for Spa and should be again doing something with them this weekend. So yeah, thanks very much and take care, everyone.